Well, thank you all. And where's Zeev? I have to say, I've been coming to this conference for so long, and it has become just absolutely amazing. And so thank you, Zeev, for a great day one. And also thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity to moderate this panel. We have just a couple of powerhouse women transforming the work in the family foundation space. And the family foundation space, we've talked a little bit today about the corporate foundations and corporate giving and CSR and NGOs. Family foundations play a very unique role in the social innovation space. Not only do they have the financial support and the business acumen, as well as some of the strategic and kind of bully pulpit status from their founders, but they have this unique opportunity to carve off risk and drive innovation in a way that few organizations do. So enough for me. I'm very happy to introduce to you our two panelists today. We've got Ayele Shakur, who is the president of the Redstone Family Foundation, and Lara Littlefield, who's the executive director for partnerships of the Paul G. Allen Foundation. So what I'd like to do is start with a little bit of an explanation from each of them on their journey to where they're sitting today, how they've come to these roles, but also what are they doing in these roles? How are they taking this incredible advantage of the power of this unique way to engage and driving impact? So Ayele, let's start with you. Your foundation is a little bit newer than Paula and I was trying to figure out, I'm like, I cannot find anything on the Redstone Foundation. And then she tells me today, oh, that's right, we just started. Tell us a little bit about this.
Yes, it
how
is
we arrived at
a
this
very new foundation. The Redstone Family Foundation is led by Shari Redstone, who is the chair of Paramount Global. And so her family is the controlling family for Paramount, which used to be known as Viacom. So that's Paramount Pictures, Nickelodeon, CBS, MTV, and so forth. So there is a foundation, a corporate foundation on the Paramount side. I have the pleasure of working directly with Shari on the Family Foundation side. And so Shari and I actually knew each other because I've spent the last 30 years of my life in direct service on the nonprofit side, actually leading amazing nonprofit organizations. And so this is actually my first foray into the world of philanthropy. Shari had served on my board for about 5 years when I was at Build, which is a youth entrepreneurship program that has offices across the country. I know one of the education sessions just gave a shout out to Build, which was really wonderful because I was the CEO when we did a lot of the wonderful work there with Comcast, NBC, Universal. Anyway, fast forward, Shari and I were having a conversation about some of the work I was doing at Build. She was no longer on the board, but definitely still a supporter and a mentor and a friend. At that point, her father, Sumner Redstone, had passed away, and so she took over his foundation in addition to her own, and she said, I need someone like you to run my foundation. And I said, really? So we sort of had that conversation, and fast forward, here I am leading this amazing work. It's been absolutely incredible to actually lead a foundation where you're starting from the very beginning. So if you look up the Redstone Family Foundation, we don't have a website yet. That's by design. We wanted to have some time to really build out the strategy and the focus. But just being able to work with Shari on the mission, we're really focused on combating racism and anti-Semitism through civics and cross-cultural education. And I can get into more of the details of what that looks like and the grantees that we support as we go.
That's great. Lara, do you want to talk a little bit about your journey?
Sure. Journey is never straightforward, is it? It's a windy one, but I was born and raised in Washington, and I've had a number of different careers, it seems, but I was a fundraiser. I've been on the other side. I was a nonprofit consultant. I actually worked with the foundation helping to secure funds for clients at that time. So I had been familiar with the foundation for many, many years. It was founded in 1988. But my last role before coming here was working at the University of Washington, where I worked in innovation and tech transfer. I got to work with a lot of investors. I was speaking a different language. It's a similar thing, but a different language. You just use different words, capital instead of grants. But got to work a lot with other government agencies, investors, researchers, and really started, getting an understanding of just this cross-collaboration and what that looks like. And a public university is a whole nother type of structure. There was an opportunity that arose. I had actually been working with this company, Vulcan, that Paul and his sister founded, and they needed some work in partner development. And I thought, I love partner development. It brings me back a little bit. It's a hybrid of what I used to do and love doing. And so I took a leap. I was working with them with another project at the university. And things quickly evolved, as they do at Vulcan and at the foundation. We are kind of an ever-evolving organization. But going back, so the foundation was started in 1988. It was co-founded by Jody Allen and her brother, the late Paul Allen, who was the co-founder of Microsoft. And the two of them really led the efforts for the foundation for many, many years. The foundation's a separate entity, but now it's taking on a whole new stage of life, particularly with Paul's passing. And so we've been around for a long time, but I actually consider us a startup as well. We have a new board, we have new structure, and we're also starting to stand up some new focus areas. We've had a long legacy in science and technology solutions for the environment, but now we're also starting to bring up a focus area in arts and culture, and what does it mean for the arts to create human experiences to better our understanding and better our understanding of each other, as well as mobilizing youth and really helping to set the next generation for success. So, yeah.
Ayele, dive into some of the mission that you're working on, as well as some of the partnerships that you're most excited about.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that's unique about the Redstone Family Foundation is, building on the work of an entrepreneurial family. We like to work with grantees from the very beginning, so we tend to be like that seed funder that will come in the very early stages. In fact, if you're like too far along, we'll say you're too far along and too advanced in the journey. So we have wonderful partnerships with great grantees across the country. A few examples with the Boston YMCA, and I actually live in Boston. I'm in the Boston headquarters. The Boston YMCA, we've partnered with them on a program called Building Togetherness, which is working with little 4- and 5-year-olds, as well as their families and their preschool teachers, to help students build an appreciation for differences. We're really teaching children to love before they learn to hate. And that program has now spread to 9 different sites, and they're planning to continue to spread that program across Massachusetts. In Connecticut, we're working with University of Connecticut on a program called Human Rights Close to Home, and that's a program for high school students where students are actually taking on human rights projects right in their own neighborhoods and learning about all sorts of issues around things like housing and economic development, things around education, and really starting to use the tools of human rights to start to make a difference in their communities. In Atlanta, we work with the AJC Black and Jewish Teen Initiative, which is again building cross-cultural understanding with teens who are Black and Jewish and teens who are both Black and Jewish, really coming together. Those young people have traveled together to Montgomery and Selma, Alabama. They've crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge. They've learned about each other's history and culture, and they've learned how to work together as a community. And that particular program is really profound because they started meeting right before October 7th, and they found themselves on that trip that exact week, and it was an opportunity to come together and show some camaraderie during a really difficult time for the Jewish teenagers who were in that program. I will also say, in addition to the work that we do with teens, we also work with grad students, with college students, and one of the things that I'm most excited about is the work we're doing to rebuild bridges between the Black and Jewish community. Those two communities, our two communities, had a long-standing history that goes back to the early 1900s, from the founding of the NAACP to the freedom rides and the civil rights movement to today. And there's just so much power that can come from bringing those communities together. our communities working side by side as allies in the fight against hate. I did mention that our focus at the foundation, our mission is around combating racism and anti-Semitism. And when Sherry and I first started talking about building the foundation, initially she just wanted to focus on anti-Semitism. And I said, well, that's part of a bigger fabric of hate in the United States and across the world. And we cannot fight hate in isolation, in a silo. So really looking at issues of racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, LGBTQ hate. There's so much hate in the world, and yet we know that by bringing people together, we can create unity and healing, and that's what the work of the foundation is really all about.
I love that. I think that's just a brilliant example. You know, we spoke a little bit before we came on stage. Yeah, let's give it a... You know, we spoke a little bit about partnerships, and you know, clearly you're partnering with the organizations that you're granting, and but now partnerships is taking on a little bit more of a disruptive model. How do you think about the role that you're creating in terms of being able to scale what you're doing and reaching out to other organizations, other funders? How do you build coalitions for impact? Do you want to start?
Sure. That's a great question. You know, we look at partnerships in many different models, and we don't believe that there's just one kind of one-size-fits-all approach. And similarly, we have founders that have an entrepreneurial background, and so it's no surprise that they have lots of ideas, but also lots of learning from the community first and foremost, right? So we've done a lot. We take a lot of time to listen, to learn, to understand. But we also, as a foundation, have said we want to be a learning culture, and we're only going to learn by doing, right, by experimenting. And so we have had a number of conversations with other potential. We've had ideas where we sought out partners and really wanted to look for a trusted relationship, and one which we both enter in knowing that it may be a risk, that we want to learn together, and that we want to be honest about what's working and what's not working. We have a couple examples of this, right? So National Geographic Society was an organization that has a tremendous network of teachers and after-school programs, and we knew we wanted to work and inspire young people in their movement building. And we knew, particularly when it came to environmental issues, climate change is like one of the top issues for young people, obviously. There's lots of reasons for that. But we knew there was good work happening. And so National Geographic Society said, you know what, we've got the network. We co-developed a program called Slingshot Challenge, which was to identify, you know, who out there ages 13 to 18 are already working on innovative solutions to tackle environmental challenges in their communities. And so we designed this kind of award, but more importantly, they also created a wraparound service approach with their National Geographic explorers who could mentor young folks, they provided skill building and workshops online and webinars to give them the tools they needed. And all we asked was that the young people submit a 1-minute video about what it is they're doing to highlight the great work in their communities. We had over 2,000 submissions across 80 countries in the first year. The work is already there. It's just trying to find those ways of tapping into it and really then highlighting the stories so that they may inspire others in their peer group. So that's just one example of a collaboration.
That's amazing. You know, Ayele, you know, some of the things that you're doing will be a model for others. Same with you, Lara. And you know, as you think about who's in the audience, who's standing up, you know, models for funding, and who's standing up organizations, what's your advice to them? What would you say to individuals who are trying to make a transformative impact in terms of, you know, some of these intractable problems, and from sitting in your seat, what have you learned?
I think it's really important for funders to think about proximate philanthropy, meaning that you are working with members of your team who reflect the communities that you're actually trying to serve. I think it's so important that as you think about who's on the team and who's leading the team, And one of the shifts that we've seen in philanthropy, fortunately, there are more and more leaders who look like me, who are doing this work, serving communities of color, who are able to lend our expertise, and just basically our lived experience is informing the grant making that we're able to do. The other thing I think is really important is that you have people on your team who are more recently coming from the actual world doing the work of direct service and then coming into philanthropy. I think that sometimes philanthropy can become that ivory tower where people become very detached from what it takes to actually do the work on the ground. And I think that I definitely bring that perspective. I see it in other foundations, family foundations and so forth, where people are coming from having done the work more recently, and it definitely does make for stronger grant making. It also gives us more empathy in how we look at and work with grantees, right? And so I think one of the things I would just encourage people to think about is, what is the load that you're requiring for people to apply for a grant, for people to, constantly be jumping through hoops with the reporting requirements and so forth. It's important that you're respecting the time of the grantees and not having an overly cumbersome application process, particularly when there's only a certain number of grants you're even planning to make for those grantees. But I think that level of empathy and understanding comes from having been in that seat yourself. And the more people on your team who have that lived experience, the better you'll be in terms of the grant making that you're doing.
Great. Lara?
All of that, all of that. Taking maybe a slightly different approach to the question, we tell ourselves all the time as a team, these are complex problems, and if they were easy to solve, they would have been solved. We just have to acknowledge that the solution is also likely going to be a pretty complex one, and that we need to look outside of ourselves. We do not have the answers. We don't even have all the expertise. We're limited by the capacity of our team in terms of who we know and what we know. And so it's really tapping into the ecosystem and the assets that are already out there. The partnership piece I think is an important one because we embarked upon a partnership with National Science Foundation mainly because from a science perspective, they understand how to do that due diligence and review in a way that we wouldn't be able to, right? So that's one example. We partnered with another organization that had during COVID, been funding arts organizations on the ground across Washington state. We didn't need to do that work. We just needed to work together to get them more resources, to get that out the door in a quick manner. So there's just so many ways in which we can also stay lean as a team to ensure that the funds are going where they need to go.
Well, what did I tell you, right? Two powerful women doing incredible work in the Family Foundation space. We are out of time, but I'd just like to say thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.